My name is Meredith Souza. I'm 29 years old. And the Thursday evening I was accidentally added to a family group chat I was never supposed to see was the evening I finally understood that the people who move away get written out of the story before they finish living it. I found out because my cousin Nicole hit the wrong name in her contacts. She meant to add a woman named Michelle, her college roommate, based on what I pieced together later, to a thread about coordinating airport pickups for an upcoming family gathering. Instead, she added me, Meredith. Same first letter, adjacent in her phone. I received the notification at 6:47 on a Thursday evening. I was sitting in my car on level 4 of the parking structure at Alderman Regional Medical Center, still in my scrubs, eating a protein bar I had been planning to eat at 2 in the afternoon. I had just finished a 12-hour shift in the hospital's patient access department. I was tired in the particular way that comes from spending an entire day managing the gap between what the insurance system says and what patients actually need, which is a specific kind of tired that does not go away quickly. I opened the notification because I thought it was a different family thread, the one we used for birthday announcements and holiday photos, which was benign and occasional. Instead, I found 41 messages dating back 11 days, and the first one I read, because it was pinned at the top of the thread by my Aunt Renata, said, "Vote below, sell Nana's house by end of Q1 or wait until fall. Majority rules." I scrolled up. I read all 41 messages. It took me 14 minutes, sitting in my car on level 4 of that parking structure with the protein bar half finished in my lap and the engine off and the concrete pillar beside me painted with a large yellow number for that I stared at for a while after I finished reading, without really seeing it. My Aunt Renata had written, in message 37 of 41, in response to a question from my cousin Devin about whether everyone had been included, Meredith moved away. Her vote doesn't count anymore. She made her choice. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I put the protein bar on the passenger seat, pulled up the county recorder's public records portal on my phone, typed in my grandmother's address, and found the deed to the property at 914 Oleander Court that my grandmother, Frances Eugenia Souza, had filed in September of 2017. I read my own name in the third line. Joint tenancy, with right of survivorship. Frances Eugenia Souza and Meredith and Souza as joint tenants. I sat with that for a moment. Then I found the notary acknowledgement at the bottom of the scanned document. His name was Gerald Park, with a commission address on Fairview Boulevard. I wrote the name and address in the Notes app on my phone. I drove home. I showered. I made eggs because it was the only thing I had the bandwidth to make, and I ate them standing at the counter because sitting down felt like a decision that required more from me than I had available. Then I went to bed, and I lay there in the dark for a while thinking about my grandmother and the afternoon in September of 2017 when she had asked me to drive her somewhere without telling me exactly where, and what she had said to me afterward, and what I had understood from it, and what I had not. What none of them had thought to check. What my Aunt Renata, in 11 days of group chat coordination across 14 family members, had not once verified, was who actually owned the property they were voting to sell. I want to tell you about my grandmother before I tell you about anything else because she is the reason this story goes the way it goes, and because she deserves to be understood correctly. Frances Souza was 78 years old and had lived in the house on Oleander Court for 41 years. She had raised 4 children there. My mother, my Aunt Renata, my Uncle Dario, and my Uncle Gio, in a 3-bedroom house with 1 full bathroom and a screened back porch that she kept full of plants she tended with the systematic attention of someone who understood that living things require consistency to survive. She had worked as a medical billing specialist for 22 years at a clinic that no longer exists, which is where I suspect I inherited both my tolerance for insurance paperwork and my understanding that the gap between what a document says and what people assume it says is where most problems live. My grandfather died in 2009. After that, my grandmother managed the house alone, which she did with the same systematic attention she gave the plants. She kept the gutters cleared, had the roof inspected every 3 years, maintained a file of every repair receipt going back to 1991 in a green accordion folder in the cabinet beside the kitchen telephone. When the water heater failed in 2014, she called 3 plumbers, got 3 quotes, chose the middle one, and filed the receipt. When the property taxes were reassessed in 2019, she reviewed the assessment herself, determined it was accurate, and paid it. She did not ask her children to manage her affairs. She managed them herself. My relationship with my grandmother was the one in our family that I would describe as genuinely mutual, meaning we were interested in each other as people, not just as relatives. She called me on Sunday evenings. She asked about my work in patient access with enough specificity that I understood she had been listening to previous answers. She told me things about her own life, her years at the billing clinic, her marriage, the early years on Oleander Court when money was narrow and the neighborhood was different, with the directness of someone who has decided that the people who are paying attention deserve accurate information. I moved to Alderman 4 years ago for a position that offered both a meaningful salary increase and a patient access supervisor role I had been working toward for 2 years. Alderman is 3 hours from Oleander Court, which in my family's geography registers as a kind of departure that carries implications beyond the physical distance. My mother understood, and said so. My Aunt Renata understood it differently. In Renata's framing, and I came to understand this more clearly over the years that followed, moving away was a statement of priority, and the statement I had made was that my career mattered more than proximity to the family, and proximity to the family was the primary currency in Renata's accounting of what made a person's investment in the family legitimate. This framing did not acknowledge that I called my grandmother every Sunday. It did not acknowledge that I drove 3 hours each way 4 times in the 18 months after my grandmother's second hip surgery to take her to follow-up appointments and help manage the physical therapy coordination. It did not acknowledge that when her primary care physician, a doctor named Valeria Osei at Oleander Family Medicine, needed someone to review and sign a care coordination form on my grandmother's behalf during a period when my grandmother's mobility was limited, I was the one who drove down and handled it. Renata did not know about the care coordination form. She did not know about most of the Sunday calls. Distance, in her accounting, meant absence, and absence meant your vote no longer counted. In September of 2017, my grandmother called me on a Sunday evening, which was our usual time, but this call was different in texture, more deliberate, as if she had planned what she wanted to say. She asked if I could come down the following weekend and take her to an appointment on Saturday morning. I said yes. I drove down on Friday evening and stayed in my old room, which she still kept made up with the blue quilt I had slept under as a child, which was not a small thing. Saturday morning, she directed me to an office on Fairview Boulevard, a suite in a small professional building with a directory in the lobby that listed a notary named Gerald Park on the 2nd floor alongside a tax preparer and an insurance agent. She had a folder with her. She had made an appointment. Gerald Park was a compact, precise man in his 60s who wore reading glasses on a chain and who had prepared the paperwork in advance of our arrival, which told me my grandmother had been in contact with him before this visit. He explained the document, a warranty deed transferring the property at 914 Oleander Court into joint tenancy between my grandmother and me, and asked if I had any questions. I had several. He answered all of them. My grandmother signed. I signed. Gerald Park notarized both signatures, stamped the document, and told my grandmother he would file it with the county recorder's office within 5 business days. In the car afterward, my grandmother looked out the window for a moment before she spoke. Then she said, "When I'm gone, I don't want there to be a fight about the house. I want it to go to someone who will know what to do with it." I said I understood. She said, "You know what to do with things, Meredith. You always have." I said I would try to be worthy of that. She said, "You already are. That's why we were at that office today." We stopped at a diner on the way home. She ordered the French toast. I ordered the vegetable omelette. We talked about my work and about a novel she was reading and about the back porch plants, one of which was not doing well despite her best efforts and which she had decided to replace with something hardier. We did not talk about the deed again that day. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell Renata or Dario or Gio. My grandmother had not asked me to keep it secret, but she had also not asked me to announce it, and I have learned, from years of working in healthcare administration, where the difference between what is documented and what is assumed causes daily damage, that unsolicited disclosures of legally significant information tend to generate reactions that are not proportionate to the information and not productive for anyone involved. I filed the memory of that Saturday in the way I file things that are important and not yet needed, accurately in a place I could find it again. The deed was recorded. It was public. Anyone could have found it on the county recorder's website in approximately 4 minutes. No one had looked. My grandmother passed away in January of the year the group chat appeared, peacefully, at home, which was what she had wanted. I was with her. I had driven down the previous Friday when her home health nurse, a woman named Cecile Broward, called me to say that things had changed and that I might want to come. I was there for 11 days. My Aunt Renata arrived on day 3. My Uncle Dario arrived on day 5. My Uncle Gio sent flowers and a card and called twice. My mother flew in and stayed through the end and beyond, and in those days I was grateful for her presence in a way I did not have sufficient words for. In the weeks after, the family gathered and scattered in the way families do, the immediate logistics managed, the grief distributed unevenly, the ordinary life of the house suddenly strange, without the person who had organized its rhythms for 41 years. I drove back to Alderman after the service. I went back to work. I called my mother on Sundays now instead of my grandmother at the same time, which was its own kind of grief with its own specific texture that I will not try to name further here. The group chat appeared 11 weeks after the funeral. I had not been involved in any family conversation about the house in those 11 weeks. I had not been asked what I thought should happen to it, whether it should be sold, what the timeline might look like, or what I knew about the property's legal status. I had assumed, and I recognize now that this was its own form of naivety, that when a formal conversation was needed, someone would initiate one that included all the relevant parties. I was a relevant party. I was, in fact, the most legally relevant party, though no one in that group chat had thought to verify that. 41 messages. 14 family members. 11 days of discussion about a property that had 2 names on the title, and the second name had not been invited to the thread. The morning after I found the chat, I called Gerald Park's office at 9 o'clock. He answered himself. I introduced myself and told him I was Francis Seuss's granddaughter and that I was one of the 2 signatories on a deed he had notarized in September of 2017 for the property at 914 Oleander Court. He said he remembered the appointment. I asked if he kept records of notarized documents. He said he maintained a notary journal as required by state law, with entries for every document he had notarized including the date, the names of the signatories, the type of document, and the document description, and that his journal entry for September 2017 reflected both my grandmother's signature and mine on a warranty deed conveying joint tenancy. I asked if he would be willing to speak with a real estate attorney on my behalf if the need arose. He said that was standard and not a problem. I thanked him, ended the call, and spent 40 minutes that morning, on my lunch break, eating at my desk in the patient access office, researching real estate attorneys in the county where Oleander Court was located. I settled on a woman named Patricia Hale at Hale and Ostrowski Property Law, whose firm website listed deed disputes and title issues as a primary practice area. I called and spoke with her assistant, a man named Marcus Webb, who took my information and said Ms. Hale would call me back within 24 hours. She called me back in 3. I explained the situation to Patricia Hale in the same order I have explained it here: the joint tenancy deed, the group chat, the vote, my aunt's message about my vote no longer counting, and the listing timeline, end of Q1, which was 11 weeks away. Patricia Hale listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, she said, "Miss Souza, you are a joint tenant with right of survivorship on that property. Your grandmother's interest passed to you automatically at her death. At this moment, you are the sole owner of that property." I said I had understood that to be the case, but wanted to confirm it with a licensed attorney before I acted on it. She said that was the right instinct. She said she would send a letter to the listing agent and to any real estate brokerage that had been contacted, informing them of the title status and advising that no listing agreement could be executed without the owner's written consent. She asked if I had the name of the agent my family had been discussing. I did. His name was a man named Curtis Farrow at Lakeview Premier Realty, who had been mentioned by name in message 26 of the group chat. She said she would have the letter out by end of day Friday. She said I should not contact my family before the letter went out. I said I had no plans to. I went back to my desk. I processed 17 prior authorization requests that afternoon. I answered 11 patient calls. I approved 2 financial assistance applications and flagged one for supervisory review. I drove home at 6:30, made soup from a box, and watched 40 minutes of a documentary about migratory birds that I found unexpectedly absorbing. I did not open the family group chat, which was still technically accessible to me because Nicole had never removed me. I did not send any message to Renata or to any of the 13 other people in the thread. Patricia Hale's letter went out Friday at 4:52 in the afternoon. I received a copy by email at 5:03. Curtis Farrow called Patricia Hale's office the following Monday morning. I know the sequence of what followed because Patricia Hale's assistant Marcus kept a call log and shared the relevant entries with me, and because my mother, who had not been in the group chat but who had been told about the vote by my aunt in a separate conversation, called me on Sunday evening after she had received a call from Renata, and the information she relayed gave me the family side timeline. Curtis Farrow called Patricia Hale at 9:22 Monday. The call lasted 18 minutes. Patricia Hale explained the title situation. Curtis Farrow said he had not been aware of the joint tenancy and had been operating on the family's representation that the estate was undivided and available for listing. Patricia Hale said she understood and that she was not suggesting any wrongdoing on his part. She said the listing could not proceed without written authorization from the owner of record, which was me. Curtis Farrow said he would need to advise the family and would be withdrawing his preliminary listing agreement pending resolution. He sent that withdrawal to my Aunt Renata by email at 11:14 Monday morning. Renata called my mother at 11:47. My mother told me about this call on Sunday, the timing of which I note because Sunday was our call day, and the fact that my mother called me on Sunday rather than in the intervening week with this information told me she had been sitting with it and choosing her words carefully, which is one of the things I love most about her. She said Renata was upset. I said I understood that. She said Renata felt ambushed. I said I could see why it felt that way. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Meredith, did you know about the deed when we were all at the house after the funeral? I said yes. She said, why didn't you say anything? I said, because no one asked me about the title status of the house, and because I didn't know at the time that a group of people was going to vote to sell it without including me in the conversation. My mother said, that's fair. Then she said, what are you going to do? I said I was going to do what my grandmother had asked me to do, which was make a thoughtful decision about the house. My mother said that sounded like Francis. I said I hope so. Renata called me directly on Tuesday afternoon. I had been expecting the call and had thought about how I wanted to conduct it. I had decided I wanted to conduct it simply. She said, Meredith, I think we have a misunderstanding. I said, what do you think was misunderstood? She said, no one knew the house was in your name. I said, it's in both our names. My grandmother added me as a joint tenant in 2017. The deed is on file with the county recorder. It's been public record for 7 years. She said, she never told us. I said, she wasn't required to. There was a pause, the kind that has weight to it. She said, you could have told us. When we were all at the house, after the service. I said, you could have asked me about the title before organizing a vote to sell it. Another pause. Longer. She said, I didn't think. And then stopped. She started again. I assumed it was part of the estate. I said, I understand the assumption. It wasn't accurate. She said, so what happens now? What do you want to happen? I said, I want to make the right decision about the house. Not the fastest one, and not the one that came out of a vote I wasn't included in. I'm going to take some time, get a full picture of the property's condition and market value, and make a decision from there. If I decide to sell, I'll handle it through Patricia Hale's office. If I decide to hold it, I'll let everyone know. She said, and we don't have any say in that? I said, I'll keep the family informed, but the decision is mine. She said, Nana would have wanted us all to be involved. I held that sentence for a moment. I thought about Gerald Park's office on Fairview Boulevard. I thought about the French toast at the diner. I thought about my grandmother's voice on the phone on Sunday evenings, asking questions with enough specificity that I understood she had been listening. I thought about the green accordion folder and the 41 years of repair receipts and the back porch plant she had decided to replace with something hardier. I said, My grandmother told me what she wanted. She told me with a legal document she filed with the county recorder's office. I'm going to honor that. Renata said, I think you're being selfish. I said, I understand that's how it looks from where you are. She said, that's all you have to say? I said, that's all that's accurate right now, yes. The call ended shortly after. It lasted 23 minutes. I took 3 months before I made a decision about the house. During those 3 months, I engaged a property inspector named Owen Brask to walk through 914 Oleander Court and give me a full condition report, which ran to 19 pages and identified 6 items of deferred maintenance, ranging in urgency from immediate to within 2 years. I engaged a contractor named Felix Amaral to provide repair estimates for the 3 most pressing items: the roof section above the back porch, the HVAC system, and the exterior trim on the north-facing wall, which came to a combined cost of $22,400. I had those repairs completed. I paid for them from my own account because the property was mine and the maintenance was my responsibility, and because my grandmother had kept a receipt file going back to 1991 and I intended to maintain that standard. I engaged Patricia Hale to review the full legal picture of the property, any outstanding liens, the title history, the implications of a potential future sale. There were no liens. The title was clean. Patricia Hale prepared a summary memo that I added to my own property file, which I keep in a blue accordion folder because the green ones were out of stock when I ordered it, and I decided that was acceptable. At the end of 3 months, I decided not to sell. I decided to rent the property instead, with a long-term lease to a couple, a schoolteacher named Diane Pryor and her husband, a hospital lab technician named Samuel Pryor, who had been referred to me by a property management company named Riverside Residential that Patricia Hale recommended. The rent was $1,640 per month. I signed the lease. The Pryors moved in on a Saturday in May. I drove down for the handoff and walked through the house one more time before I handed them the keys. The back porch plants were still there. The one that hadn't been doing well had been replaced, sometime in the last year of my grandmother's life, with a broad-leafed variety I didn't recognize but that looked, when I stood at the porch door in the morning light before the Pryors arrived, entirely at home. I told my mother about the lease. She said she thought that was the right call. She asked about the Pryors. I told her about Diane and Samuel. She said they sounded like good people. I said I thought so too. I did not inform Renata directly. Patricia Hale sent a formal notice to all interested parties informing them that the property was not being listed for sale and had been placed under a residential lease agreement. Renata received that notice on the same day my mother received a copy I had sent her myself. My mother called that evening. Renata did not. I have thought a lot in the months since about the sentence my aunt wrote in that group chat. Meredith moved away. Her vote doesn't count anymore. She made her choice. I have thought about what it means to be reduced to a geography. To have the distance between your current address and the house where you grew up treated as evidence of a decision about belonging, as if the only people who belong to a place are the ones standing inside it, and the ones who have gone somewhere to build something are already absent in the ways that count. My grandmother did not think that way. She had spent 22 years in a medical billing office managing the gap between what was documented and what was assumed, and she understood that the documented version was the one that held. She had driven herself to Gerald Park's office on Fairview Boulevard before she asked me to take her there. I know this because Gerald Park told me, when we spoke the morning after the group chat, that my grandmother had come in once before to discuss the deed and had come back with me the second time to execute it. She had planned it. She had considered it. She had chosen the form of her intention carefully and filed it with the county, and then handed me the receipt of that decision by asking me to be in the car with her on a Saturday in September, and by ordering French toast at a diner, and by not making it more dramatic than it needed to be, because she was not a dramatic person, and neither, when I have enough sleep and enough time to think, am I. What I have come to understand is this: presence is not only physical. My grandmother understood that. She did not measure my belonging by my zip code. She measured it by the Sunday calls and the hip surgery follow-ups and the care coordination form and the way I sat with her in Gerald Park's waiting room and asked questions until I understood what I was signing. She measured it by the things I did when she needed them done, which were the same things she herself had always done: systematic, documented, without announcement, because the announcement was never the point. The document was the point. The document, filed and recorded and retrievable by anyone who thought to look, was the point. I did not move away from my grandmother's house. I moved forward from it. Those are not the same direction, and she knew the difference. There is a Sunday evening I keep returning to, not the one at Gerald Park's office or the one at the diner, but an ordinary one from maybe 2 years before she died. We were on the phone, the usual call, and she asked about a patient access case I had mentioned the week before, a family who had been fighting a billing error for 4 months and who I had helped navigate a formal appeals process that finally resolved in their favor. She asked if they had called to say thank you. I said they had, actually. She said, "People remember when someone shows up for them in the paperwork." I said I thought that was true. She said, "That's the work that matters. The part that other people don't see until they need it." I didn't know at the time that she was also talking about herself, about the accordion folder and the property tax receipts and the Saturday on Fairview Boulevard. I understand now that she was telling me something about how she had lived and what she valued and what she was asking me to carry forward. I did not need her to say it plainly. She had said it the only way that counted, in a document on file with a notary stamp and a recording date and a public search result that any of 14 people could have found in 4 minutes on a Tuesday evening if they had thought to look. Not every inheritance is announced. Some of them are just filed and waiting and exactly where they were left. In the second month after the Pryors moved in, Renata sent me a text. Just one. It said, "I hope you're doing well. I'm still thinking about all of this." I read it and held the phone for a moment. Then I replied, "I'm well. I hope you are too." I meant both sentences. That was as far as I could go at the time, and I did not pretend it was further. I called my mother that Sunday and told her about the text. She said, "That's something." I said I thought so too. She said, "Nana would be glad you're renting it to good people." I said I hoped the plant on the back porch was still doing well. My mother laughed. It was the right kind of laughter for a Sunday evening. Here is what I know now that I did not know with the same clarity the evening I sat in the parking structure on level 4 reading 41 messages. Being legible to the people in the room is not the same as being present in the document. My family had a version of me, the one who moved away, the one whose vote didn't count, that was constructed entirely from the distance between my address and theirs. That version had no Sunday calls in it, no hip surgery drives, no notary visits, no 12-hour shifts, no property inspectors, no careful decisions made from 3 hours away with the same systematic attention my grandmother had given the plants on her back porch for 41 years. The document had a different version. The document had my name in the third line. You do not have to defend the version of yourself that exists in the record. The record speaks. You keep it accurate, you keep it updated, you file the receipts and return the calls and show up to the appointments and sit in the waiting rooms and sign your name when the time comes. And when someone tries to take a vote about something that already has your name on it, the vote is not the thing that determines the outcome. The deed is the thing that determines the outcome. The deed was filed in 2017. It has been waiting ever since. There is a specific moment from the Tuesday call with Renata that I want to ask you about because it is the one I keep returning to. It was after I told her that my grandmother had expressed her wishes through a legal document filed with the county recorder's office, and Renata said, "Nana would have wanted us all to be involved." I did not argue with her about what my grandmother would have wanted. I said I was going to honor what my grandmother had documented. And she said, "I think you're being selfish." And I said, "I understand that's how it looks from where you are." That sentence, "I understand that's how it looks from where you are," is the one I practiced before the call. Not because it was designed to end the conversation, but because it was the most accurate thing I had available. I wasn't performing restraint. I genuinely understood that from the outside, from the geography of Renata's assumptions, my decision looked like selfishness. I simply also knew that what looked like selfishness from outside the document looked like stewardship from inside it. If you have ever been the one who honored what someone asked of you in writing, who held a decision that looked difficult from the outside and clear from the inside, I want to know, was there a moment when someone finally stopped arguing and just looked at the document? When the paper said the thing the room had been trying to say out loud for months? Leave it in the comments. I read them. If this story stayed with you, a like and subscribe help more people find it. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.
I'm Meregit.
Thank you for being here.